Aberration from 1997 is in the genre of cabin in the woods movies, but this time they added snow. What horrors await our protagonists in this tiny mountainside retreat? Let's find out. When it opens up, we see some lady driving around. We find out later that this is Amy, and she's running from her abusive ex. She up and left him with only her cat, some goldfish, and, oh yeah, 50 grand that she stole from him. Well, that ought to help her rebuild her life. She pulls into her old family cabin, where she stayed for summer vacations as a kid. She settles in, but her cat, Frankie, who has his own IMDb page, might I add? Well, Frankie doesn't want to go inside. Maybe Amy should listen to him. You should always take note to what your animals have to say. Well, eventually she coaxes him inside and starts cleaning up. For a rickety old cabin, it looks like it'll serve its purpose well. The stove works, and eventually Amy gets the generator working. So she's got power now. She should be all set. Elsewhere on the mountain is Mr. Peterson, a crazy old man who lives alone with his dog. And yes, you guessed it, the dog dies first. Come on, why you gotta do that? Back to Amy, who sits down to read a book and lay low for a little while. And she goes to eat an entire cake with her bare hands. That's my kind of girl. She takes a bite and sees that something's already been nibbling on it. So the entire thing is ruined. Mr. Peterson pays her a visit, scaring the crap out of her. She remembers him from her time visiting in the past and invites him in for some coffee. But he's out looking for his missing dog, who we know he'll never see again. At this point, Amy heads into town for some food and supplies. After the cake incident, she thinks she has rats, so she comes to get some traps. The store owner, Mrs. Miller, doesn't have any in stock, but she does have some industrial strength poison, so she takes that. Amy goes home to take a candlelit bath, as you do. She puts on a mask to look like Robin, and then she goes under, just in time to avoid whatever Frankie just saw. Just then, the generator goes out, and Amy gets dressed to fix it. Out in the shed, she sees what happens. It's been chewed through. Again, she thinks it's a rat. But then some weird goo falls on her head. Not something you would typically see from a rat. Amy goes back to the store, which now has the traps, and she meets Marshall Clark, a biologist, who offers to help out. However, Amy thinks she can handle it herself. What she can't handle, however, is engine problems. It seems like the rats, or whatever they are, chewed through the belts on her car. So she's stuck. Marshall gives her a ride back to her cabin, and she agrees to have him look around for a little bit to find the rats. He snoops around, but it's not until Amy gets bit by one they find him. Marshall goes to get some band-aids or something from the medicine cabinet, and that's when he sees it. Frankie's dead. So now they gone done killed the cat too. No time to really worry about that, because we finally get to see our monster of the movie. It's not a rat, but an oversized mutant gecko.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
At this point, Amy's ready to call it quits and to just get a hotel. So that's what they do. They leave. But a blizzard has rolled in. And, well, that's going to complicate things a bit. Even so, they load up and head out, only to wreck the car halfway down the mountain. So now they're really screwed. Stuck in a blizzard with no option but to hoof it. Luckily, Mr. Peterson's cabin isn't too far and they make it inside, but it's oddly quiet and cold. The first thing they do is check the stove, which is on, but it's not lit, filling the cabin with gas. Soon they find Mr. Peterson, who lost his fight with the geckos. For some reason, Amy thinks the only logical thing to do is to light a box of matches and blow the place up. Sure, great idea. Now they have no choice but to hike all the way back to Amy's cabin. and they just barely make it. Inside, they find the place abandoned. No lizards in sight, so that's good. They think about what to do next. Amy shows Marshall how to shoot, and despite being pretty bad at it, they do manage to take another one out. They continue to fight them, but soon they learn that these geckos have a trick. When you kill one, the next generation can't be killed the same way. So basically, a gunshot won't kill them anymore. No other choice but to move on to the poison, which again will only work once. They continue going around, killing as many of these things as they can, until they finally find an egg. And instead of preserving it, saving it to study for later, Amy decides to just take it out. I mean, these things did kill her cat after all. They figure out that most of the eggs are upstairs in the attic, and go up there to take them out. The geckos escape into the walls, and the duo destroy the cabin getting to them. But by golly, they get him. Not before one attacks Marshall and spits some poison in his eyes, blinding him. That's going to complicate things a bit. Amy continues fighting alone now as Marshall recovers. Once that's done, she moves on to smashing eggs. Finally, after being satisfied all the creatures are killed, they settle in for the night, sleeping together for the warmth. Yeah, sure, for the warmth. In the morning, Marshall can see again, so that's good. But they get a visitor, Yuri, Amy's ex, who isn't happy about her leaving with all his money. He quickly takes Marshall out and then heads on in. When Amy sees him, she's a little more than surprised. He was able to put two and two together pretty quickly and figured out where she'd be. They fight for a bit. Marshall tries to save the day, but fails miserably. Yuri sits him down and demands to know where she hid his money, which obviously she's not telling. A bit confused, Marshall chimes in, wanting to know what they're talking about. And here's where we learn that Amy and Yuri were a team, working together in hotels to scam rich out-of-towners. And apparently they were pretty good at it too. Both Amy and Marshall see a gecko hiding out in the shelf, and Yuri shoots it, which apparently he has a bigger caliber bullet or something, because he takes it out. There are others there, in fact they're all around him, but again, no worries. He opens fire on him. In the end, the two fight Yuri, some eggs fall on his head and hatch, apparently eating him from the inside out, which is pretty gross. So Amy does the right thing and takes him out of his misery. He's out of the way, but what about all the geckos? They might as well light the house on fire, burning up everything, including the 50 grand. They hop into Yuri's truck and head back to town. But wait, you didn't think it'd be that easy, right? A couple of the lizards got into the engine and are causing all kinds of problems. While Marshall gets out to take a look, Amy gets attacked inside. She fights them off, and they manage to contain them all in the car. So, what do? Blow them up, of course. No shortage of explosions in this movie, that's for sure. Now, they don't have a vehicle, and Amy's hurt pretty bad. Well, Marshall ends up carrying her all the way back to the general store. But by this point, Amy's looking more like Jack Nicholson at the end of The Shining. Worse yet, she has a gecko in her leg. They get it out, and it's real nasty. Had me cringing. Well, the little guy's now on the loose, and Marshall has to hunt it down, destroying the store in the process. It manages to take out Mrs. Miller, who was a pretty innocent bystander, so that sucks for her. Just when it looks like Marshall's next, Amy wakes up and blasts a flare right into its mouth. And finally, it's all over. And that was Aberration. And it surely is a movie that exists. I wouldn't say that it's good or bad, honestly. It does kind of feel like they couldn't decide if they wanted to make a crime on the run style of movie or a monster movie. Speaking of the monsters, they're pretty lame, aren't they? Obviously, the budget shines through with these cheap-looking rubber creatures, and I could never find them that threatening. even though the idea that once you kill them one way, you can't kill them again that way is pretty cool. But it didn't really seem to matter all that much. I mean, how many times did they just shoot him? The acting was fine, and the small cast did a good job. Really, there's only 6 characters, including the cat. Aberration has this weird sense to it that makes you think it's a made-for-TV movie, but I don't think so. There's some language and a little bit of nudity too, so I don't think that was the case. There's no DVD release as far as I can tell either, or if there is, it's rare. You can find it here on YouTube, so if you want to watch it all the way through, then I'd say that's probably your best bet. I give Aberration 2 Geico geckos out of 4.
You've been watching this girl with your binoculars, Marsh.